Well, kids, it's that time again. Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. I don't know what it is about guys from the East Coast that wind up out in Phoenix, but it's crazy. I have the one, the only, Mr. Pete Loran, who this is the first time in a while that you've been doing one of these, is it not?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's. I don't even know how long it's been. It's been 7, 8 years, longer maybe. I don't know. It's just never been my thing. The other guys, they got that handled all the time, and I just kind of sat back and went, "Mm-hmm, yes, of course."
Well, you're looking great, my man. So it's good
Thanks,
to have
buddy.
you on this little old podcast. So I guess the first question I'll ask you, how did you, obviously Pete from Trixter, let's get that out of the way. Um, how did you wind up in Phoenix? And I always like to find out how people that are like from, we'll say a coast away almost, how did you wind up there?
I came out here in late '98. Was married at the time, and I think we just kind of were getting fed up with the whole New Jersey East Coast, uh, you know, just congested, completely overtaxed. Property taxes are out of control. And I was like, we got to get out of here. We got to try something new. And I'd always been through Arizona and Phoenix going, man, I really, I like it here. I like the way, they like the vibe. I like the atmosphere. Started looking into real estate here and going, my God, what you could get for your money here. Property taxes were low. I mean, you could get brand new homes versus back in Jersey where I grew up, a newer home back there was built in the 70s or 80s. So there was just a lot of incentive to come out here. We had no kids at the time. So it was kind of, I don't want to say easy, but kind of like, if we're going to do it, let's do it now. So I had a couple of buddies who lived out here, and that was more than enough reason for me to go, okay, I'm coming. And we went out here, and we came out here, and we just never looked back, man. It's been great.
So there you go. So we've dispelled the myth that musicians don't know what to do with their money, because we all know that we like to keep it, as much of it as we can, honest and
Yeah,
monthly.
it's not easy. Yeah.
It's not in this day and age. So I guess I'll start by saying, everybody will know you from Trickster. I mean, you guys were, you guys had a great run, and I'll say maybe a short run for what you did, but I mean, you guys made your mark in a very short, quick period of time. Um,
Right.
I guess, without rehashing old stuff, I mean, what are your thoughts on that run? I mean, was there any maybe go, man, we should have had a longer run than we did, or were you happy with the way things kind of were?
I mean, that's hard to say. We had a great run. I mean, out of the gates, we were just kicking butt. Um, you know, our record went gold off our first single. We were out on the road with the Scorpions. Doing back to back sold out arenas. Night after night. I mean, it was just kind of it was happening really fast for us. And by the time that first run had ended, we were just we were completely just burnt. So we didn't take a whole lot of time off. But by the time we started doing the second record, which I thought was a lot better than the first record, um, things are already starting to go south. And I don't want to say we didn't get a fair deal, because there were tons of bands who didn't get a fair deal. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So I don't have any, bitter feelings about any of that. But it would have been nice to have maybe come out a few years earlier and had a little bit longer of a run, and could have, who knows, established ourselves a little bit better. And, who knows what would have happened.
Well, and I mean, I remember you guys. It was just, to me. I mean, I know I'm up here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and it seemed like you guys came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you're everywhere. And I mean, I mean,
Yeah.
you had obviously had very good people behind you, because you wound up on
Yeah.
some great tours. You were
Yeah.
getting out there on MTV and all that. Um, in terms of, is there one, I guess, shining moment that you remember in that period of time that you go, you know what, man, if I could just take this as a snapshot forever and just go, this was the best time. Would there be one of those for you?
Yeah. It's funny, if you asked anybody in Trickster that same question, it's probably all the same exact answer. And I'm almost would guarantee that. Um, as kids or teenagers, when we got together, we kind of put this band together. Um, we would also be huge fans of other bands, and we would go to the local arena, and we would see shows. And our pact was that, one day we're going to play this place, and we're going to be on that stage. And then, sure enough, it happened. And to really put the icing on the cake, when our record did go gold, we had our gold record party while we were playing that arena, in the backstage area with MTV and all those folks. So for us, that was the snapshot. That was what we all dreamt of.
Um, so obviously you guys kind of, came out at the tail end. I hate the hair metal, I guess, tag, but I mean, you
Yeah,
guys are kind of
yeah,
on the tail end of that.
oh yeah,
A couple of things that I think got notoriety pretty quickly with you guys. One was obviously your guitar player, Steve Brown, got a lot of notoriety for his talent, but you
yeah.
kind of got pegged as a voice, right? Because I mean, back then you either had amazing singers or you had amazing frontmen, but it was, rarely you had both. But I mean, you were an active frontman, but you were known for having, a great voice for that era.
Is that right?
Yeah, you were, man.
I didn't know that. I mean, when I think about it, like that whole first record, I had been singing for maybe 3 years or so, and super amateur. Um, that record almost killed me, between pre-production and day after day after day, and then actually going to record, and then record while the guys were tracking. And really, by the end of when all the tracks were done, I had, for the first and only time in my life, lost my voice.
Hmm.
So we got to shut down the whole project. Flew all back to New York. I took like a month or two off or whatever, and then got back at it. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, to hear what you're saying is great, but I mean, for me, it's I listen back and I go, man, whew, I wasn't really happy with anything I did with Trixter until really our last couple of records, to be honest with you.
Well, that's interesting because obviously you guys are young when you're in the studio, and I always talk about, you're out there, you're playing, you're writing your songs, and you think everything's kick ass, and you go commit it
Yeah.
to a studio, and it's like, oh my God, is that what
Oh
that
yeah.
sound like? It's
Oh yeah.
very humbling, especially if you haven't been at it before. So you said it almost killed you. In what sense? Was the producer pushing you hard to get these tracks? Like what? In what sense did it almost
We
kill you?
we had the whole full production of us out there with managers and whatnot, and we had set up shop at Sound City. Yeah, Sound City. They had like a rehearsal area there, and we were just beating the songs to death with the producers. Getting arrangements, changing parts, and every time we played the song, I was singing it. And we were doing that day after day. And then once we went in to start tracking, we I was singing along while the guys were playing, and that was day after day, hour after hour. And I was a young guy then too. It's like I could take a pretty good beating, but at one point I was fried. It was just like it was coming out, but it wasn't real good.
And that's tough. I mean, as a singer, I've played with many singers, and I mean, a drummer. I'm a drummer. If you have a bad night, you can kind of fumble your way through it. Maybe a
Yeah.
guitar player. With the singer, man, if your instrument goes south, it goes south, and there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do.
Yeah, and that was the first time I was ever in a real studio too. So it was stressful. It was a lot of pressure for me. I could push my way through a lot of things, but that was a tough gig. That was I'm I don't want to say I'm not proud of it, because obviously it put me on the map as a person, and the band, of course, and that'll always be out there. But it was just, if I could have had some more years under my belt as a singer, I would have preferred that. But yeah, I'm not complaining.
Last question before we end this first segment. So you guys are doing all the pre-pro. You're getting in to go into the studio. Was it a situation like I've heard of before where you're in there with a producer and they're just chopping the songs to pieces and telling you to fix stuff and change stuff and you're going like, what the heck? Or did you guys have a lot of say in what was going on?
You know, there was definitely parts where that happened. I mean, our third single song called Surrender, that was originally a super up tempo song, and now it got turned into a ballad. But you know, it worked. It really worked. But as young guys back then, you can't really. It's hard to see that, But you've got record company people in there. You've got the producers in there, and you've got the band guys going, "Oh, we want it to sound like the demo." Typical standard stuff. But at the end of the day, those guys, you know, they got their way, so to speak. And, there was a little bit of negotiations back and forth, but they knew what they were talking about. We had never done it, so we got to listen.
You know what? We're just getting started here with Mr. Pete Loran. He's all the way in sunny Phoenix. I hope it's sunny today out there.
It is. It is.
And we're going to be back after this. Welcome back to Rimshots with Sean. I am here with Mr. Pete Loran of Trixter. I don't know, say formerly of Trixter. Trixter, how do you like to refer it?
That's a good question. I haven't done a gig, a Trixter, as most people know it, hasn't done a gig since, I want to say, 2017. A couple of the guys are still doing stuff. They're doing an acoustic thing. I'm not involved in it, so I think I'll always be known as the guy from Trixter, but not actively, I guess.
Not a bad handle though. And I mean, I don't know how many times, so I don't know if you're on Sirius XM, but I like Yacht Rock and I like Hair Nation. And it's funny, I'll go on Yacht Rock and they play Summer Breeze about 4 times a day.
Great.
And I'll go in Hair Nation and 1 in a million gets played quite a bit, man. And I don't know if you knew that or not, but
yeah, I don't listen to it, but that's great. I like that.
Yeah. I don't know if it equates to any royalty money in this day and age, but it's kind of funny the way it works. So, I mean, I'll ask, and I actually had Gus on the show, and Gus, I mean, he's funny. He's like, he's a riot. But so you guys, I guess, finally, the music industry being what it is. I mean, everything. We all know what happened with the Seattle thing and what have you. When you guys, I guess, finally decided that phase 1 of the band was done and you parted company, were you guys all buds when you left, or what was the situation when you call it that first day, I guess?
We were fine. God, I'm trying to think when that exactly was. We'd done kind of like a van tour in '94, and in the middle of that tour, Gus actually quit, which was pretty interesting. So he was on the outs as far as the band was concerned, and he remained that way for quite a while. And everyone just kind of, there wasn't any issues with anyone else in the band, but everyone just kind of went and did their own thing. It was just kind of weird, I guess. These are guys who had spent, the last handful of years pretty much daily talking or together or traveling, and then it just kind of went quiet. And then Gus I hadn't talked to Gus probably for close to 10 years. So, and same with the other guys. And then when we got the thing back and rolling in 07, 08, that's when everyone kind of got back together, so to speak.
I always love to ask this question of people because I grew up in the same genre, and it petered out, if you will, and the whole whatever happened in the 90s happened. And now it seems to be that genre of music seems to be as popular, if not more popular, than it's ever been. And yeah. I ask you, why do you think that is?
I don't know. I guess it's like a nostalgia, reliving youth for a lot of people. I don't know. I call them oldies shows now, It's kind of, for lack of better words, it's kind of what it is. But I don't know. I think people who are in their 50s now were a lot different than they were 30 years ago. And they're still kind of want to stay active and, doing stuff and, reliving, their youth, so to speak. Um, I don't know. I guess, and some of them are dragging along their kids now who are rediscovering that music or, were forced to listen to it and got into it. But it's great that it is, I mean, especially for the guys out there working.
I think you nailed it with the last piece because I know my son who's now 25. I mean, he had cherry pie slammed down his throat from the time
I
and
bet.
he's into hip hop and he produces that stuff, but he still goes back to the classics and he likes Kiss. Like Pete, I did my part to send Paul and Gene's kids to school, as you can see.
Oh, very well
Right.
done.
But and I think, and it's cool because people going back and revisiting that music can see that everybody that was involved could play. It wasn't like they were just a bunch
Yeah,
of doughheads that studio musicians did. Like people could play.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, that's so true. It's funny too now with the internet and YouTube and social media. When you look and there's so many, like, I'm just saying, guitar players. There's so many great guitar players now, and a lot of these guys are really young, which is so weird to me. Um, how did this? How did you start playing, this style of music, and you're only 23? It's like it's awesome to see. Um, um, and there's so many great musicians. And there were a lot of great musicians back then too that never saw the light of day because, it was just real difficult to get your name out there. There was no social media. But I'm sure there's a lot of guys that can, in other genres of music that can still play great and even not hair metal or hard rock back then. All the musicians were awesome. you know, R&B and funk and, new wave. Everybody could play, man.
Um, it's funny when I was growing up, I had a couple of friends. I had a friend that lived in Boston, and he used to go down to Jersey every now and again. He always used to tell me about the scene down there, and your cat just about took a nosedive up. um, but he talked about the folks that I guess they were very well known, but they weren't maybe signed acts or like the Southside Johnnies and things like
hmm
that. What was that scene like down there? If you could just kind of explain it in a nutshell to anybody that didn't get to see it.
Yeah, it wasn't necessary. Well, we were North Jersey, so we were kind of, 25 minutes outside of Manhattan. In Manhattan, New York, Greenwich Village, man, you want to talk about a scene. But like the Southside Johnnies and, um, you know, Gary U.S. Bonds and there's so many guys from like Central Jersey, a little bit more South Jersey that were like almost like icons there.
Right.
But, you know, they might have had a record deal. It was like wasn't a huge deal. And they weren't really known anywhere else. But in the state, they were like, these guys were the man. And then you'd go in the Greenwich Village and there were just club after club of incredible musicians. And that was it. That was their gig. Um, Trying to think of like, take a guy like, you ever heard of Jeff Buckley?
I've heard of him. Yes.
Yeah, Jeff Buckley was like that in the Village. He was just a huge underground type of dude, like Bono and Sting would, when they were in town, they would go sneak into his small club gigs of his. This is before he had a record deal. So New York and New Jersey always kind of had that thing happening where these were incredible guys that just never kind of got over the edge.
Right. And actually, there's a neat connection to Halifax and Greenwich Village, that being Denny Doherty from the Mumbas and the Papas, because he's from Halifax, or he was from
Oh, is
Halifax.
that right? Yeah.
Yeah. And he had a career obviously down there before the Mumbas and the Papas. But I just find, and I'll ask you this because you were an East Coast guy, and I guess you always will be an East Coast guy at heart. Now you're
Yeah.
on the West Coast. Um, Growing up, there was a different vibe. The East Coast maybe seemed to be a little grittier and nastier. The West Coast is a little bit more polished.
Yeah.
Did you notice that back then, or do you still
Oh
notice it
yeah.
now?
Oh yeah. We totally noticed it. I mean, you know, I'll see, posts or whatnot on social media, and it'll have a Trickster thing in there and said, glam band. I'm like, we were never a glam band. guys in LA were. We never did. None of us ever wore makeup. We always kind of wore jeans and t-shirts and sneakers and flannels. I was wearing flannels and photo shoots in '88 and '89.
I was
So
going
it
to
was
say
just
that you were doing it before it was the rage, right?
yeah, oh yeah, and it was just kind of how we grew up and who we were. But we there was a very obvious difference between the West Coast and the East Coast. Look at the guys in like Skid Row too, same as us. Just like more like street type guys.
And it's funny because back then a lot of people thought, they got long hair, and especially the East Coast guys, because I'm an East Coast guy, you can still beat the crap out of somebody if they looked at you the wrong way, right? People don't
Yeah,
understand that.
it's all about attitude.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when was the last time Trixter? You said 2017 would be the last.
That I can remember. 2017 was probably one of the last gigs we did. I think so. Yeah.
And you and I talked on the phone, and you said you've got some stuff on the go, which is great. I look forward to whatever you do. It'll be
Yeah.
great. But
Yeah.
hypothetically, somebody comes up and says, you know what, there's a big show, be it a Monsters or Rock, whatever. You think you could get you four guys in a room again and say, you know what, we could make this work for one big blowout show? Like, is the relationship enough there, or do you think you could or couldn't do that?
Well, as of right now, there's three of us, me, PJ, and Steve, who we talk. We're cordial. I actually just saw PJ about 3 weeks ago. He was out here. He's out with Chris Jericho's Fozzy,
Oh yeah.
and they were doing U Fest here in Phoenix with Godsmack. And he had called me up and said, let's get together, let's grab some lunch. So, and I hadn't seen him since probably 2017, and it was needed. It was, for me, it was needed. We hadn't really kind of talked past what had happened, and so we're great, and it was really good for me. Gus, on the other hand, with those guys, not so much.
Yeah.
But I do think, and they've all done interviews and really talked some shit about each other, which I get it, I guess. But I I think if you got all four of us in a room, within a short, reasonable amount of time, everyone would be, hugging each other and hey, I'm sorry or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
As far as doing a gig, I don't know about that, but it would be nice if that could happen, though, at least that part.
Sure. But I think sometimes, people go, oh, the music is, you got to get together and redo that. But I think if, in the case of gas, like, if there's like a fence that needs to be mended, if you could do that, nothing else happens, that
Right.
probably would be amazing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'd like that to happen. I don't know if they'd like that to happen, but it would be good. Right. The possibility of doing shows, I don't know if that ever happens again, but like I said, those guys are very busy, number one. They always have been. But they're also doing like a Trixter acoustic thing. And if they ever roll through Phoenix, I'll probably jump up there and do a couple songs. I don't see why not.
Well, I mean, that's cool that you still have that. I mean, it's funny for me. Kiss is one of my favorite bands, as you can see. And for me, it's just kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. When you see them fighting in the media about stuff that, you go, guys, you're 70 some odd years old. Come on, right?
Right. Right.
And I get it, hurt feelings and different sorts of things. But, you get one trip around this whole thing, man. And I think to have those, bit unfinished business is kind of silly.
Right. Right. And these are guys that known each other since grade school, junior high, grew up in the same town, started a band together, gang mentality, us against them. We're getting a record deal. We're going to, now we're going to open up for the Scorpions in front of 18,000 people. And, we're going to have to kick them in the teeth because we want them to accept us. So, and, and all the accolades and, whatnot throughout the years, it would be kind of sad to let that just all get kicked to the side because of something stupid,
Yeah, for sure.
My opinion.
And duly noted, because like at the end of the day, we're all older and more mature now, and
Yeah.
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So in terms now of you, Pete, and you get, you're doing all kinds of different things, but what do you hope to have on the go? Like, I don't know, is music a thing for you now that is it a burning desire? Do you want to get back into it in a bigger way? What are your plans?
Since I 17, when I stopped doing shows pretty much with them, I was still working here as basically a gigging musician. I was in two corporate bands. And that's where a lot of the problems came between, with the Trixter thing too, was the scheduling and, what was going to be best for me, um, as a sole provider for my house and my kids and my bills and whatnot. There was a lot of hard decisions. And then ultimately I stopped doing that as well, because I was just burnt altogether on all the hours and the scheduling. I haven't done anything other than, tinkering around at, on the home digital audio workstation and whatnot. But recently I've been kind of working with a guy, just kind of going over old ideas, songs, really killer Nashville session guy, um, really smart, really knows his way around structuring and whatnot. And we put a couple things together. So it's kind of got me like, I mean, I'll never be able to turn music off. It just, I tried for years and it always seems to come back. So I'm starting to get in that mode now where, at least the creative side, um, which is, I thought has always been fun. I don't, see myself getting out there and doing gigs and coming home at 3 a.m. anymore. Just not a whole lot of fun.
No, but it's like that old movie line. Once you think they're out, you get pulled right
Right.
back in, right?
Exactly. It's like a light switch. Nope.
Right. And I mean, let's call it what it is. You mentioned corporate stuff, and when it always cracks me up when you do a corporate event, you name your price, and somebody goes, "Oh," it's like, no, it's not for that show. It's for the blood, sweat, and tears from years and years and years to get to that point. And people
Yeah,
don't
absolutely.
understand that, right?
Right. Well, and that's the funny thing too, since I've stopped doing gigs, and then, before the whole pandemic and COVID and all that stuff, um, everything has gone up. The cost of gas, I don't have to tell you and everybody else, but everything has gone up. And from what I understand, what they're paying bands really hasn't moved a whole lot.
No,
So it's just kind of like what you're saying, you're paying for, all of these scars.
absolutely. And I mean, we work in the Canadian peso, so it's even harder to make money up here, right? It's crazy.
Oh man.
You seem content. You seem like you're totally good with where you are, which is great, because some
Yeah.
people that I've talked to that not so much, right? I mean, it's just one of those things where they're looking for that victory lap, or they think life's not complete. And what I'm getting from you is, if something happens, great. If it doesn't, that's all good too. Is that a fair statement?
Fair statement. Very fair statement. Yeah, I'm good. I don't need to get out and do shows. I don't need the adoration or whatever it is. Um, Kind of over that, kind of burnt on that stuff. But musically, if something comes up, I'm always kind of got my eye open a little bit.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for doing this, man. It's been a treat to meet you. We had a good chat there it was last week, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm threatening to get out that way. Hopefully, if I do, I'll get to meet you, because there's a couple of guys out there that I've got to know in the last couple of weeks that they seem like they have an awful lot of fun, and I want to get
Yeah,
involved in some of that.
you've got the whole inner circle here going between Mick and Bobby and Gus, and yeah, they're yeah. You want to come hang out with those guys? Trust me.
Well, Gus is supposed to get some vodka up here. I don't know if that's ever going to happen or not, but we'll
I'm
see.
gonna remind them. Well, yeah, right here.
Yeah. I hear it's
That's
good
his
stuff.
vodka.
I hear it's good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. He's doing all right.
Sir, thanks for doing this. Be well. We'll talk to you soon, Mr. Pete Loran.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it,
Yeah.
man.